Good afternoon. Happy Wednesday. We are starting on our new trial day of Wednesday meeting together. I'm so glad to see you. I'm Dr. Robin Gould. My website is newcovenantpath.com. And here you are listening to Messianic Lamb Radio, where I am doing this program. And I'm so happy you're here. I'm glad that we get to spend this hour together and talk about things that matter and kind of put things into perspective. And we have a meaty, good show today, I think, because there's a few things that I feel like are really knitting together for my message. And I think it's exciting. And I think this particular week, we've had a rough week in this world, and we have hope. And I think that's really my biggest message, is the message of hope, and that the kingdom of God is here. And nobody can take that from us. And nobody can make us not a part of that. And that's exciting. So I just want you to be encouraged, and I want you to feel that the future begins now. I also want you to know the future begins now, because it does. And if you want to create a great past, make now what you want it to be. And so we will walk forward in hope. And, I know life is difficult and people are going through a lot of different things. I'm going through my own stuff. And you know what? We just need to be present. And we do need to walk into our future with positivity. It's really important, not toxic positivity, but actual real hope. And so that's my beginning statement of how the future begins now. And like I said, check these programs out. If you're watching this through any other forum, it's always great to know that it's messianiclambradio.com, where you will never miss these programs, because there's never a conflict of interest in that at that site with these messages. Anyway, just something for you to keep in mind. So let's get started. So let's get into what the Torah portion is. And I actually, again, I'm trying to get a little bit more into the Newer Testament, because I would like to touch on some of these things. So right now, this week, we have the Midbar, which is in the wilderness, right? Where I think it's Numbers 1-4 up to, I think, 20, verse 20. I think it's that. But the wilderness is where he speaks. And I feel like Matthew 4, which is what we are covering today for the newer covenant, or the Newer Testament, the refreshed Testament, this is very evident about the wilderness. It talks very specifically, and I want to go into a few points, and we're going to cover a lot of ground. So just buckle in, where I'm going to try to get through it in an hour. This just goes by so fast, but we're going to try. So I'm going to read you today's Brit Hadashah portion. And here it is, Matthew 4, as follows, starting in verse 1, obviously. Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. The tempter, or in some people call it the test, came to him and said, so this would be Satan, right? The testing is a massive part of the strategy that he employs to get through, right? Testing something can be good or bad. Testing something is something we're going to talk about today. The tempter came to test him. And he said, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." And then we have the word "but" here. It's translated in English in some translations as the word "but." But it's not, but let me keep going. But, or, and. Okay, you're getting my point already. And Jesus answers, "It is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." Now, these words "but" in the Greek are two different words. That's interesting. Why not use the same word? Now, clearly, we have the words in our language. We have "moreover" and "however" and "instead." But I think it's significant that they are picking these different words. This word that is more often translated as "and" And they're saying as but. But the reason I say that, and why does that even matter? Because so what? I mean, who cares if it's but or and? Like, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to say, for semantics' sake, in the idea of attachment, I think it matters, because this is why. Was this meant to be? Was it God, Yeshua dodges a bullet that was by saying something? Or was this a pre-planned event? Was this meant to be? And it was so this happened and then he did this? Or was it like this happened, but he did this? Now, that might not sound like it matters to you, but sometimes these little, I'm going to say it's like minutia almost, like these little things that happen, give people an idea. It's almost like it drives the narrative, because it looks like he was opposing something rather than this was happening. And as was planned, this is what was said. Do you see that? That might not matter to you, but that's something that stands out to me. Admittedly, I tend to see things always through what's driving the narrative minutia, like what's the emotion attached to that, or what's the expectation, or what's the undercurrent, or what's between the lines. That's kind of where I spend a little bit of time. And then it says, then the devil, and in this time, instead of calling him the tempter, he's called the false accuser. And that's interesting, because he says that he takes him to the holy city. He sets him on the pinnacle of the temple, and he says, if you're the Son of God, and then he gives him a challenge. Now, the false accuser, I think that's perfect wording there. Not that I give them an A+ and, oh, good, you passed the Robin test. I'm not trying to sound like that. But what I'm saying is, I really think that was a great way to word that. And because it says that God can't be tempted, and he can't be, because God is good. God is always good. God always loves people. He can't be tempted to abuse his power. He can't be. It just is not going to happen. The false accuser takes him, and then he tempts him. Now, some people say Yeshua the Messiah can't be the Messiah because he was tempted, but he wasn't tempted. Just because somebody might say, and I don't want to say it, but, do something bad, Elohim. That's tempting him. That doesn't make Elohim not God, just because that was said. What it meant was, internally, there was no decision-making process where he weighed out the options and decided on being good. Because the innateness of God is that he is good. And the innateness of Yeshua is that he is the Messiah to save, the anointed one, the appointed role of that salvation. Yeshua means salvation. He is salvation, literally and figuratively. He is implicitly salvation. He can't be tempted, right? You can't, hunger is an implicit thing. You can't tempt it to not be hungry. It is what it is. Okay. So he takes him to the holy city. He sets him on the pinnacle of the temple where he just has the full view. And he says, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written. So he's like, jump off this cliff situation, right? For it is written. And so now he's quoting the Torah. He will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. Now, we're going to talk today about context, of understanding context. Here, you have the adversary taking that out of context. That's why he's the false accuser. That's why he's the tempter. Always wanting something that was true to be taken out of context, which is not true, right? Do you hear me? That's where some of the Pharisees were wrong. It wasn't everything they said was wrong. It was that they were taking it out of context. So when they say you can sin through the commandments, you understand that. If you're not in the spirit of the commandment, you can use it for evil. And so you have to have context for what was behind. That's the, the letter of the law. There's the spirit of the law, right? So you have to put everything and keep it in context. And so he says, jump off. And here's what it says. It says that nothing will happen to you. Okay. Jesus replies, and this is what he says. It's also written. He's putting this in context. Hey, it's also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test. So here's what I hear him saying is that these two things that you're saying that are written, that the angels will keep you from harm, goes with don't put the Lord your God to the test. They go together. He says it's also written. So these things are married. So we're going to talk more about that later because it's an important point of how we read the Bible, how we understand it, so we can understand how the Father operates in taking care of us the understanding we can have. And he gives us a brain to understand things. We can do this. Again, the devil takes him to a very high mountain. So there's that devil, that diabolos word, right? The false accuser. And he shows him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. All this I will give you, he said, if you will fall down and worship me. And so, okay, this is where Yeshua is like declaring, away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. He was not tempted. He tried to tempt him, but he couldn't be tempted. And then the devil left him, and the angels came and ministered to him. Oof, I think that's pretty incredible. And then it says, when Jesus heard that John had been imprisoned, he withdrew to Galilee. Leaving Nazareth, he went to Capernaum, which is by the sea in the region of Zebulun and Naphtali, to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. Land of Zebulun and land of Naphtali, the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people living in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. This is interesting. It says that the Galilee of the Gentiles, this area, these people. Remember Peter talking there, the Capernaum, right? On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. And from that time on, Yeshua began to preach. So this marks some sort of a shift in the behavior of the Messiah, moving in that next season of preaching. Remember before it was like, don't tell people what I did, and this is not my time to be talking or saying things, whatever. But he was teaching. But he wasn't publicly preaching per se. And so from that time on, after a light has dawned, they've seen a great light. And then it says, from that time on, he began to preach, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. So we've already talked many times on this program about the kingdom of heaven and how it's called the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, depending on the audience, if they were comfortable with saying God or not. Heaven, God, right? It would be the same thing. That this is within you. And if a light turns on, you see with your spiritual eyes. You see. You don't just perceive something like a rock. You see what the rock means, that it was put there for a reason. There's a difference, right? You see. And that's where, have you ever been enlightened? I know you have. You've been enlightened to something. You didn't know something. And then all of a sudden you see 100 million things that you didn't see before. Because a light has shined on something. You could even have a person completely misconstrued. And all the things you think they did You have this, I work as a marriage and family therapist. This is something I encounter all the time. People will have an idea about a parent or something, and then the lights turn on and they see the parent was not X, Y, and Z as they thought. They were self-sacrificing, working through things behind the scenes this person didn't know about. Then they, okay, the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God is where you actually see the light turns on and you actually see all of the spiritual things you see, or many, do we ever see all? One day. But we see with those eyes that see the hope, that see the plan, that see the miracle, the shift, the risk we take, that it's worth it, sees the value. All right, that's that light on. And so context is so important. And the Messiah is saying to the adversary is, yes, it's written, and it's written, because these things go together and you have to marry them to come, right? You have to see them as going together. If you deconstruct them and take them separately, you won't understand them. So it's like invoking God versus like testing God. There's a difference. So when people in the Bible, it's like, you have said that you will X, Y, and Z, whatever. Like you've said you're close to the brokenhearted. You're invoking his words and his promise, saying, I believe that promise. And the Father ministers to you. That is not putting him to the test. That is believing what he said and invoking it. Like when Elohim remembered Noah, he acted on it, acted on that promise. He remembered him. He acted on this promise. Well, we act on the promises of God by invoking the words he already spoke. And when we say the words of God, beautiful things happen because his word is perfect. It's truth. It's the true light. That's the light. So that's different. Invoking is different than testing. Because invoking is, you said, and I trust. And my expectation is around what you say. Versus, here's what you'll do. Here's what I'm asking you to do. If you're really God, like, that is not attachment. That is bargaining, not bonding. That's different. Make a bargain with me. Show me, right? That's different than I'm struggling in a process here in my faith. I'm laying out my fleece. That's different. That's asking for confirmation. That's different than testing. Jump off, and is an eagle going to take me and fly me to land? And the Father's like, no, don't put me to the test. That's not an attachment behavior. That is not. And we are not to put him to the test. You can go jump off a cliff and say, God, I know you won't want me to stumble. Well, then don't jump off a cliff. But as things come to you, the Father will intervene in his way where he feels that's the right thing to do. He'll always do the right thing. Okay. Are you with me? Okay, let's get here. So when he says, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down. Okay. And then he says, it's also written that we will not put the Lord your God to the test. So in that one little area, the adversary can't be corrected because he can never be correct. But the words were spoken of truth, that these two things go together. So this leads me to this topic, and this will lead to even deeper here. I have been seeing a lot of articles and blogs and different people and books, and I have not read a lot these books. It's called the deconstruction movement, and it's happening in Christianity. So I have a lot of things to say here, and I want to quote how this is defined in the mainstream. I pulled this off. I don't know if this was Wikipedia. I mean, this was just let me see if I can get there we go. I'm just going to quote it. Just the mainstream definition. And I quote, emerging Christians see themselves as overturning outdated interpretations of the Bible, transforming hierarchical religious institutions, and reorienting Christianity outside the walls of the church buildings toward working among and serving others in the real world. I have that in quotes, unquote. Okay. So that's an interesting definition. On its face, it sounds good. Like a lot of that's good. And a lot of that is good, right? We have to be careful how we do these things and how we view these things. That can be a very dangerous thing to do if you don't have context. Or it can bring you context if you actually understand the most important things. If you can embrace that we are asked to obey and expected to obey the Torah, because we are as children and those are house rules, and that's what love looks like. When we love our children, we don't let them run out in front of traffic. When we understand that from an attachment perspective, you can look at things in a bit of a deconstructed way. And I say a bit, and I don't even know if that's the right word. And I'm going to try to give you an example of what I'm talking about and why I'm warning you that you're going to start seeing more and more of this, because the tempter, the false accuser, the one that wants to take scripture and make two things fight against each other rather than complement each other and create a bigger picture of the goodness of Elohim, that can be what's happening there too. It's going to depend on how you view this. Now, it might just be nomenclature of like, that's what deconstruction is. It's always going to be wrong because that just means progressively getting away from the commandments. Well, that's always wrong. That's done. I'm just not even going to ever entertain that. Okay. And if that's what that means, stay away from every one of those books and every one of those blogs and just keep going in the Torah and don't worry about it. And I'm not reading those books because I have the Torah and I have enough with my mentors and the people that I learn with to go down. I don't want to go down any rabbit holes, if you know what I mean. I don't want any of that. But I want to show you a picture, and let me see if maybe I will. Maybe I won't. I was going to share a screen, but maybe I won't. I'm going to, yeah, maybe I will. I'm going to try to share a screen. I hate to show you my ring light, and I apologize, but I'm going to probably, let's see here, share, and let's see here, right here. Okay. See that picture? That is a picture of strawberry shortcake. So what you see here is strawberries, sometimes sugared, sometimes not, whipped cream, and then some form of cake or shortbread or cookie, but a textured cake, like a sponge. Sometimes it's shortcake. So most usually it's a more of like a biscuity like short, meaning it's not gluten-y, not stretchy. That's okay. Now I want to show you. I want to show you a deconstructed strawberry shortcake. So that's a deconstructed dessert, which is kind of a modern thing to do, where you take each of the elements and you separate them and serve them that way. So let me just stop sharing here. We'll go back. Okay. So do you see the difference there in that dessert? Now, here's what I'm trying to say with deconstruction. Okay. You need context. Now, if you're familiar with strawberry shortcake, you know what it is, right? You know what strawberry, you've had it hundreds of times. You like it. The reason you order it on the menu in a deconstructed form is because, well, this will be novel and fun and interesting. And it's great to check out different textures or flavors. Okay, but let's take this a little further here. we want to always think Hebraically. And I know that that word can to some degree invoke fearing. Like there's a lot of different things that people say they're thinking Hebraically and they're just mean. And that's not what that means. The word Hebrew, meaning crossed over, is in the Bible for a reason. And if people have hijacked it and attached it to movements that can seem, not friendly or whatever, that's not the fault of the Bible, and we don't need to attach that together. But the Hebrews crossed over. They had an experience. They didn't like deconstruct crossing over, they crossed over. They went from slavery to freedom in this extraordinary gesture of courtship by the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's that word Hebrew. They had an experience. When you eat strawberry shortcake, you have an experience. They didn't deconstruct this. When we tell that story every year at Pesach, during Passover, we tell and we retell. The telling, right? The story. This is a telling of our of this beautiful deliverance from slavery. So we tell the whole story every year. The whole story, not just one little part of the story. We tell the whole story, and it takes a long time because the whole story matters. The whole telling of that story. So if you have never had strawberry shortcake and somebody did strawberry shortcake, okay, now let's talk about like eating strawberry shortcake. You have the fruit, which is like a little sweet and tart. You have the whipped cream, which is creamy. It's dairy. It's sweet and like velvety. And then you have this shortbread, this short cake, right? Which is crumbly and has a texture. And so when you eat that dessert, you're by design, when it was put together, you got a little of everything. And then you just kind of had that experience of eating that dessert. So you were finding that strawberry was tempered by that whipped cream, and then you get a little texture. And it was like, oh, this is the perfect combination. And it became very popular, right? So that's what that experience is. Now, if you order it deconstructed on your plate, if you're not familiar with strawberry shortcake, if you understand the idea, if you've never seen it, you think that's just your dessert, you're like, oh, okay, so there's a pile of fruit and here's this. You're not thinking about combining them. You're not really going to understand strawberry shortcake. It doesn't mean you're not having a delicious dessert, but it's not really strawberry shortcake in its understanding of what strawberry shortcake is. It's a dessert, but it's not strawberry shortcake. Strawberry shortcake deconstructed are three elements that when put together, you could have the experience known as eating strawberry shortcake. Do you see the difference there? Now, unless you understand strawberry shortcake, and let's just say you don't understand it, and somebody hands you this plate, puts it on the table in front of you, and you just eat some strawberries, you're like, oh, yum. And then you eat the whipped cream, and then you eat the little cake, and you're like, oh, that was tasty. But that does not bring you into the understanding of what strawberry shortcake is. Do you see what I'm saying about deconstruction? You have to understand the bigger picture to embrace the novelty of it deconstructed. And that is a novelty taken out of something as a whole. My friends, it's very dangerous to do this with the Bible unless you know the foundation, unless you understand the concept. You can't just pluck a word out and create a doctrine around it, though that's happened so much, and look what's come of it. So, are you deconstructing your faith to see it better, to see it differently, to challenge it, to reframe everything, to make it fit what you want it to? These are questions we have to ask ourselves. These are important questions because the characteristics of strawberry shortcake as a as complementary flavors and textures and colors all put on one thing, this texture, color, flavor, when we deconstruct that, we are not having that same experience of description. So put this in, like, what about if somebody deconstructed you or me or just your family? If you think of your family. Maybe somebody in your family did something really wrong or whatever. But if you look at that family through that single event, that becomes your filter. That's a bad family. A lot of people have great families, and somebody made a mistake in that family. But if we deconstruct the elements and we take one and make this a standalone theory of what that family is, we do not know that family. We don't understand. And what will happen is we will not value that family. There will be all kinds of slander about that family, like the slanderous one. He wanted to take things apart and have them be separate, not understanding the point. Why don't test the father? Because he won't show up and doesn't know how to help you? No, because that's not the role of a child, to test the parent, to put the parent to the test. That's disorganized attachment when we're constantly testing. We talk about attachment. We're going to talk about it more. But people wouldn't understand you even if they just deconstructed you and just talked about you, like one thing you might have done or said. These programs that I do, I always try to say, keep in context what I'm saying. Like, understand, I'm trying to illuminate a point. If somebody only saw one of them, they might get the complete wrong idea about me. And if people see a lot of them, they're going to start saying, oh, okay, so that's building on this. And well, we have an hour together. You can't deconstruct and use just one program and say, that's it. That's the buck stops there. The buck never stops. I don't know everything. Never claimed I did. You never thought I did. I never thought you thought I did. Right? But we have to take everything into context. So the reason I brought up like this is as an attachment principle is that when you take the two butts in the beginning, this is an attachment principle. Remember that Yeshua didn't overcome obstacles he didn't expect. That's an important attachment principle. What happened was this a planned overcoming or did he dodge a bullet? Planned. If it's planned, what does that mean? It means that your Father in heaven is equipped for all of your needs. And that Yeshua didn't prevail because he had to. He prevailed because he got to, right? He had already planned this. It wasn't like, oh, shoot, now I have to do this. No, this was the plan because he values you. And does he not value you if it took him by surprise? Of course he still would have. But I don't believe that's what happened because I think the Father was sending us this message that at the foundation of the world, this lamb was slain to cover everything that you'll ever encounter. You're okay. That's the parent taking responsibility and being the parent. And being the parent, being the stronger party to take care of the weaker party. He made you, right? You didn't ask to be born. You're living a life he gave you. Well, his goal is to restore all things. He will. So from an attachment perspective, I would say that all of this tempting and attempt to thwart this plan or whatever, it was just part of the plan. Like, yeah, I get that I'm going to get tempted, but I can't be tempted. Get and be, those are different things. Tempt me all you want, it won't happen. And so it wasn't that God lost and regained control, right? Because that would be a parent that's not really fully equipped and capable of this relationship, of being the restoration. So that's my opinion. But that would maybe not jive with everybody, but that's how I see it. that he knew all these things would happen. Now, people and him interact and strive together, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about him at the foundation of the world. That lamb was slain. Means that was already thought of before anyone even did anything wrong. And that speaks of him caring for and valuing his creation, his people, you, right? Now, this goes in with, if you see my other programs, just really quickly, the 3 pillars of attachment is that the parties have to be capable of their roles. They have to be consistent. So you're not never knowing ever what you're going to get, which is another big topic. And both parties benefit from the relationship. And if those 3 things are in line, you get the tenets that emerge from that would be like bonding. And actually, let me actually read the official. This is official from Bowlby. I believe I get this from Bowlby. Or Ainsworth. But bonding is an intrinsic human need. And it is. It is an intrinsic human need, bonding. And an intrinsic meaning it was designed and placed there, which means that both parties benefit. Elohim enjoys the bond, as do we with him. Now, we have with each other too. He says, love me with everything in you and worship me, and love your neighbor as yourself. Bond with me in a worship way because I'm dad. Bond with each other, your siblings, right? Your family. This is an intrinsic human need. The second tenet is the regulation of emotion and fear to enhance vitality. So this would be like regulating emotion, being consistent. Where insecure attachment, like maybe people have a parent that they were so unpredictable with their moods that you never felt safe. You just were always like walking on eggshells or wondering that's really tough. And that's where people get insecure attachment. And then they are either avoidant or they're very clingy or they kind of vacillate between the two. And that's rough. That's a tough one. Now, Elohim is in control of himself and everything else. And yet I believe, my opinion, that he created this realm where he could strive with us and benefit as he sees what we do. Not everybody believes this. There are people who believe everything was planned and known and everything. And I think to a greater extent that could be true. But I do believe there's an organic back and forth between us and the creator. That is where like Moshe changed his mind about something. And did he change his mind? It said he did. That is neither here nor there because this doesn't interrupt our bigger sense and our bigger understanding conceptually that the Messiah is there to save all mankind. The Father is in control and that everything's okay. And that doesn't challenge that. But within that, maybe we see things a little differently here or there. But I do believe the lamb slain at the foundation of the world covers that it'll all be okay. But both parties benefiting and regulating, working through, this is about benefiting and consistency. And then this idea of being capable, right? The third tenet is that it promotes adaptiveness and growth. Now, that is adaptiveness, right? If Moshe changed Elohim's mind about something, he's adapting. Now that might scare you, and please don't hear that wrong. What I would say is that the ultimate control is Elohim, and he opted for this organic back and forth full of emotion and full of risk and potential and reward and joy, right? That's not robotic. Don't take that out of context. Not robotic. And that would be, are we capable? Are we capable of this relationship of growth? Yes. That's why we have the Torah portions. So that as we read them and we live life and we learn of him and learn of us and learn of this earth and the way things work, we become wiser. I mean, that's what the Torah tells us, right? That the Torah is the truth. It lights our way. It's the lamp of our feet. It's light of our path. This is what gives us wisdom, thy word, his word. And each year when we go through this cycle again, we understand things a different, better way, more painful way, more just way, maybe justice. Maybe this year we're wrestling with what justice looks like. And we see everything new through that lens. Maybe we're learning mercy. Maybe we're learning adaptability. Maybe we're learning social connections. Maybe we're learning humility. I don't know. Whatever it is that you're in, whatever realm you're in, whatever learning process you're in, it's good. And the Torah portion will read you as you read it, and it will take you through, turn the light on. Just like Yeshua said. That light is on because people see this Yeshua is for me. The light's turned on, so now he's going to preach. If you have ears, let him hear. He doesn't preach when there's no ears to hear. That's why I really don't like any sort of open air preaching, because it's like that's just throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing if something sticks, and that's not really personal. So anyway, that's just almost like announcing, like, I have a daughter. Does anyone want to marry her? Like that. Like that's not how you would court for, that's just not how that would go. It would be more personal. But the more we learn of God in context, the more the Elohim becomes relatable to us in the way he speaks to us. And Yeshua like teaches us in parables about the soil, about the plants, about the sheep. I mean, these are all parables that we understand as we walk through this earth. And so this takes us to this idea of, let's just say cognitive theory. Let's just tie it into that. And so cognitive theory would be maybe personality types, cognitive types. And there's different ways to see cognitive theory. There's Carl Jung, which is not what I do. But there are a lot of people who believe in a lot of Carl Jung stuff, and he did have some good understanding of cognitive theory and the ways brains work. Though cognitive theory has abandoned a lot of when Carl Jung went further with elements and forces and all this, people have been able to back away from that and really enjoy learning about actual cognitions. Different people are born with different cognitive abilities. That's a fact. That's science. That's not in any way New Age or anything, contrary to the Word of God. We have different people that different parts of their brain light up to process information. And I really do believe in those four, that cognitive function stack, and that there is truth to this. And it's not everything though, because you can't just, it's helpful to be able to deconstruct the way that our cognitions are and say, okay, so when information is presented to me, the first way that I process this information is with my dominant skill, which for me would be internal intuition. So that would be the way I would look at things. Where my husband would be the opposite. He would do internal sensing. He's a now guy. I'm a strategic future person. He's a now person. The idea is to understand why we might see something differently. The idea is to have a bigger understanding of what we don't see as much as what we do see, and have the wisdom to come together in humility to say, now, whose cognitive function operating dominantly is going to reign supreme right now? Right now, we need to know what's now. My husband, what? You tell me, use the genius that the Father gave you, like what's that? And sometimes it'll be me. Something will be strategic and future thinking, right? And I have more of a future understanding. I have that emotional intelligence where I'm able to like put things together about what people are probably thinking, or could be thinking, or what chain of events might occur that would bring about certain outcomes. Or my husband can just read the room to a certain degree about something now, but has no future, just doesn't even go there. And the idea isn't to default to these settings, but to appreciate them and know how to operate in and out of where our role is invoked and where we need to park it and let someone else, right? That's how it works. Somebody's the hand, somebody's the foot. But the idea is that if you were to deconstruct me into my 4 cognitive functions and say, this is who Robin is, you would really miss like who I am. And I would miss it. Though was I benefiting from deconstructing what those were and saying, okay, this is what I do best. This is what I do second best. And I'm not that great at that. And I need to flex that muscle there. And I'm really not good at that. But those are the 4 things that I will generally default to. And the idea is that we grow and adapt. And we do grow. Our soil becomes more fertile. To know like, oh, that's just what I usually do doesn't mean I'm right. It's very expansive to understand that. And so that's cognitive theory. So people might call that personality theory. And people can take that so far and just live in that world. And they're missing humanity. They're missing growth. They're missing all of these things. But at the same time, rejecting that fully, I feel like those people are missing things. And so I think everything in context. And recently I was just reading, actually, I think it was this morning even, if you remember, there was this woman, her name is Elizabeth Smart, and she was kidnapped and held captive, and then she got rescued. She got away from her captors. And trigger alert, this might bother some people, and I'm going to be very careful, but I'm going to quote her because there was something really powerful that she said. And I think this is a very interesting example of context. And I wanted to use a powerful example. I didn't just want to talk about like a minor example, and maybe I will. I'll lead with a minor example. Then I'll say what Elizabeth Smart said. So let me back up a little bit for context, just to help you understand, kind of put together what I've been saying. So we're almost out of time here. Yeah. Have you ever just, like, I remember one time I was traveling with somebody, and it was just this raining. I had probably 4 hours left to get home, and it was just this pouring down rain, so hard that you just didn't want to drive. It wasn't even safe. And we were driving, and we looked, and right off the interstate there was a movie theater, and we were just like, oh, this was going to go. The weather report said this was going to go on like all afternoon. So we pulled over, not expecting to at all. And we went into this theater and we looked at the movies, and I mean, nothing was really anything we had, oh, I can't wait to see this certain actor or certain plan or what, movie or whatever. And so we chose a movie that just seemed like, oh, we'll just buy time, watch this movie. And we went into the movie and we sat there, and it was really funny, great movie. Really, I think an average movie, but it was pleasantly surprising that we actually enjoyed laughing at this movie. And that's the story of that movie. Now, if you were to so I go home and I say, hey, I saw this movie and it was funny, and like, I don't know, it just was such a great movie. And they went to that movie. It was just a really average movie. But that would be taking it out of context, because what was happening was that movie was a refuge for me. It was a shelter for me. It was a pleasant distraction. And really, there's a biological component here, even like of safety, that we were entertained, and it was pleasant. I didn't even expect to like it at all, and it was great. So that changed everything for me. That was a whole entire experience. That movie was just one part of an experience. If you deconstruct it and you say, this movie will make you laugh and feel comforted and feel sheltered, and somebody isn't in a rainstorm driving all day for hours with 4 more to go and can't even see, and then they're just pleasantly surprised, that's not their experience. They're going to go and just be like, oh, Robin said this movie she felt this and that. And they don't feel that. It's an average movie, nothing they would go out of their way to see. Well, I didn't find that movie. That movie kind of found me, right? So that's an idea of deconstructing something and not getting the meaning. Now, transitioning here and segue to Elizabeth Smart, she did something that I think is very difficult, and I think it's hard. But they were talking about her intimate life with her husband after having been sexually assaulted on a lot, all the entire time that she was kidnapped. She was sexually assaulted, and that's very, very traumatizing. And they were asking her how she could have an intimate life now and enjoy it after experiencing such sexual trauma. That was so painful for her. And then here she describes, and this is what in quotes, she describes what she calls big differences between consensual sex with her husband and rape that allows her to enjoy this intimacy. And that's really powerful. And people who have been through sexual trauma that struggle with this, please don't hear that. What I'm trying to explain is this powerful way where she was able to not so much deconstruct, but reconstruct. The idea is, and they ask this in deconstruction, once you deconstruct, how do you reconstruct? Well, then that's the power of you to do that. But she was actually taking this and almost reverse engineering this. Like she says, she was talking about, sexual intimacy is entered into by choice. She says, also known as enthusiastic consent, which is true. And it is based off a relationship built off of trust and mutual love. And then she says this, she's able to deconstruct what happened to her because the people who abducted her deconstructed intimacy, took that away. But she was able to see it in its context. This is what she says. Sex is more than just the physical act. It's about love, connection, and pleasure. Now, that is a very difficult task, but there's a gift she has here. There is some sort of a foundation, some sort of an understanding she has that they took sex out of context and it made it rape. And she knew this. And as an adult, she understands that her intimate life is consensual and in a loving relationship. And that these things, when they're taken out of context and they're just elements of themselves, that's wrong. But when it comes out of a trusting, loving, mutual relationship, that's a marriage, a purposed in its intended design, she's able to keep that together. Like Yeshua put together, says, yes, it says this and it says this, and they both go together. You have to put them together to understand it. She knew. You put these things go together to be what it is. To be strawberry shortcake, really? When you eat that deconstructed dessert, you're going to know to take a berry and a little cream and a little bit of the cake in each bite. You're going to get that experience. The novelty is it's served to you, so you say, wow, look at the little tiny vanilla bean flecks in the cream. I miss that when some of the detail. But the idea is to have the full experience, and each thing is working off the other thing. You can't ever understand the Torah unless you know the Torah. That's a simple statement, but it's so true. That's why Paul in Romans 7:1 says, I'm going to tell you something, and I'm only talking to people who know the Torah. These are the only people who understand what I'm saying. And even Peter says, listen, Paul is going to say things that you're not going to get unless you really get the Bible. The people that are unsavory, unstable, or, the people who are ignorant of the understanding the Torah, or the people who want to use it for their own selfish means, they're going to use Paul. He's an opportunity to mess this whole thing up. So he's warning people. And that's why when you go into Romans, and if you get my divorce and remarriage in the Bible, I go into that a lot deeper. Do a deep dive into that. That's a huge attachment piece to how the Father loves you. But he clarifies, conceptually, if you know the Torah, you're going to get what I'm saying. But if you don't, Please don't read anything Paul ever wrote. You will not get him. If you don't understand the societies to which he spoke, the culture, the religious reality they emerged from, if you don't get these things, if you don't understand what is being said to whom, just don't read it. Stick with very simple parts until you get a little bit more. You have mentors that can show you more of these things. Because when we deconstruct and we work a whole doctrine around one thing, we have to figure out how to try to do spiritual acrobats to make things fit again. And that's what attachment wounds look like. That's what it looks like when a little kid is defending their abusive parent. They have to make stuff up and they have to try to draw from some of the truth they know. Like, well, I was really bad, so they hurt me really badly. And that helped me not be bad. They're going to defend that parent. Well, people will defend their doctrine. They will defend a doctrine that's wrong. That's called confirmation bias. No matter what I see, it's going to confirm my bias. The idea here is that we don't live in a confirmation bias, except that it says that the Father's good. He's always right. He's always for you. He's always going to uphold his Torah because he gave his Torah to you so you could live, not die. If you understand that and you're not challenging that, everything in the Torah isn't going to be terrible, horrible, scary. But if you're ever taught that the Torah is mean and was just a punishment until the real God got here, you're going to see that and you're going to read everything else after right of Matthew, right? You're going to see everything left of Matthew as just like, ugh. But you don't even really have read left of Matthew. That's an attachment wound. And so deconstruction, worry about that word. And at the same time, embrace the idea of when people find Torah, they do some deconstructing. They're like, wow, I really believe this was associated with this, and there's really no connection there, but there was a connection here. So they deconstruct and they reconstruct with truth because they let the Bible speak for itself. They let the law first mention lead them down to understand how this word is used first is how it is used, and let the Bible define itself. These are really important attachment principles, not to a book, but to a God that wrote the book. We have to trust the God that wrote the book, that he is good. Then we can open the book without fear. Now, you know what? Wisdom emerges when we fear the Lord. Because the more we have this reverence of him as being always right and that he will act in a disciplinary way when he needs to, we are safe. We're in his favor. We're enjoying this relationship. There's no kink in the pipe of like us and him being at odds with each other in any way, because it's a real relationship and he has real emotions, as do you, as to how this relationship functions. And remember that this is an organic, authentic relationship. He is in control, but I believe he's given you free will so that he can strive with you and enjoy the struggle of you. He struggles with you, right? He's with you. Like, I always feel like, and I say this so often because I really do believe this, that the wrestling that Yaakov had was such a divine message about how this goes. We wrestle with God. We do. He wrestles with us. Like it's a challenge. This is all a challenge. True relationships are challenging. Yes, people that just lapdogs, whatever. I see that all so annoying. And you just know if you're just yes to people, do you value that relationship, or do you just value exiting the tenets of that relationship so that you don't have to be bothered and harassed by it, or it's a hassle? If you really value the friendship, the relationship, the love, or whatever it is, you're going to approach with humility and honesty and authenticity and power and say, let me clarify This is what I meant. You're going to deconstruct what you said. This is what happened. This is what I meant. This is what's going on. Now tell me how you perceive that. And then you shut up and listen to that person. And you take the information in without planning your response. That's called connection. That's bonding. That's not we're bargaining and who's right. We want connection. Very important. And one of my books that I wrote with Kenneth Sandifer, it's called Safe Conversations, a 40-day journey. It's the devotional, the interactive guide, I guess we could call it, from Created for Connection, which is the faith-based edit of the book Hold Me Tight, which is an emotionally focused therapy book for people that wanted to stay out of the counseling room but do some of these things in their own world and just alone. Check that book out. It's on Amazon. And but go through Created for Connection and then get that book. It's for 40 days. But this is where people learn to communicate and learn attachment. And they deconstruct things and they reconstruct things safely based on the tenet of what's the intended design of marriage, that our lives are beautiful and that we help each other. And not that this spouse is a constant obstacle. Our spouse is iron sharpening iron. My husband's opposite than me in a lot of ways. I have become a lot more like him and hence a much better person, to be honest. The more I get to be more like my husband, the more I like myself and the more I'm likable. Because I always want to say that is my better half. Like I have ideas. This man has core goodness in so many ways. And I've learned, and he'll say these things to me that, well, maybe he never really, looked strategically at something or looked future or whatever. And I helped him. Like he's kind of become a little bit more like me. And that helped him round him out more. So that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? So in the world of deconstructing, remember the strawberry shortcake thing. Remember Elizabeth Smart. Remember these things. I'm trying to give you the movie that I talked about. I'm trying to give you examples and parables and ideas and true life stories to just sort of open this topic up so that you don't get in any way deceived through a deconstruction process. Well, at the same time, yeah, there are some elements here. We do deconstruct and we reconstruct, and we have to do that to eliminate confirmation bias. So we actually have a relationship rather than an affiliation. Okay, there's a difference there. A relationship takes the risks and trusts and believes. And love is like that, right? It believes all things. It's right. This is really important that we understand these attachment principles. Love's a risk. It's a risk even the Father takes. The earth is his footstool, but you are a risk. You can reject him. It's your choice. It's kind of interesting. I don't know if you found this to be encouraging or helpful. Let's see. We are at the end of our time because boy, do we ever go fast. I don't know. I feel like these hours just really, really go by fast. And there's some comments and I would like to check the comments out. So, look, I have Ellen Watson. Hi, Ellen. I missed you too. Amy Ladybug, excellent analogy. I've been concerned about the deconstruction issue. Yeah, so people are hearing this. Excellent. Thank you. I'm glad. And there's Charlie from the Rooted Cafe, ROOTED KAFE. Check that out. And of course, people talking to each other. And yeah, I can't imagine living through that. Yes, I know that, Elizabeth Smart. I almost didn't bring it up, but I felt like it was such a powerful example to make my point. And I was trying to be very healing to people who have been through trauma. And her story is very inspiring. Yes. Ama Ladybug. Oh, that's pretty. I love seeing you in different setting in the internet world, Charlie. Oh, that's so nice. I love your comments. Thank you. That is so nice. I think that's so cool. I love when you all talk to each other too and find your connections here. But we aren't bargaining using the Torah as a bargaining chip. We are bonding with the Creator because he's our parent. And eventually there'll be that wedding supper of the Lamb. We go to that next level. And I just want you to know you can trust the Father. And as we work through understanding attachment, we strive with him until we get our name. Our hip's going to be snipped out a little. We're never going to walk again. And everyone's going to know we've wrestled with the Father. And guess what? The Father and you together, you prevail because that relationship is that pearl. that you end up with. It's that jewel, right? That's our jewel. So I've so enjoyed talking to you today. I hope this was inspiring to you. I hope you enjoyed learning about Yeshua from my lens, at least, the way I see things. I love sharing it with you. I hope it was comforting. And I just hope that you remember to come back again to messianiclambradio.com. My website is newcovenantpath.com. And I would love to see you there. And I will start getting some of these shows put on there. I'm working on all that. But anyway, I guess until we meet again, the future begins now. Bye.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.